Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Broadway Jets YouTube. You'll know me from Twitter as NYJ Mike. I'm joined as always by the master of receipts, NYJ Matt. And Matt, the Jets have just fired offensive coordinator Mike Lafleur.
Yeah, rumors started earlier today. They were using like a Houston news station as their source. Aaron Wilson and Dove Kleiman try to get in front of it, but it appears around like what 6 o'clock tonight. Schefter and Rapport came out. Mike, I know you are the guy. You were a type of guy that wasn't really calling for LaFleur to get fired, even though a large portion of Jets Twitter and most Jets fans were. What are your initial reactions after seeing LaFleur get in the boot?
Yeah, look, I thought it was a bit of a knee jerk. These kind of things, once the Jets, you lose 6 games in a row, you don't score a touchdown the final 3 weeks. I get it. It's not 1968. You got to score some touchdowns. But look, when the Jets were 7-4, and then they played those games in Minnesota and Buffalo, Mike White's playing really well. The Jets are averaging 420 yards per game of offense. At that point, you could have easily won the Minnesota game. Berrios makes that catch. Um, it didn't seem like even a thought on the horizon that you're going to fire this guy. Seemed like an up and coming young coach. There's not too many great options available, so I didn't want to fire him. I understand someone wants to, there's got to be a fall guy, whatever. I don't think that's a legitimate reason to fire a guy who you might think is an impressive young coordinator. That someone has to take the blame because the Jets, struggled down the stretch. If Mike White finishes out the season and things go south, fine. What are the facts? The Jets are the 29th offense. I get it, but
But
you
here's
lose your
the
you lose your quarterback. That's tough.
Yeah, you have a quarterback go two overall that doesn't develop into what he should be. You're throwing two backups, and then one of the backups ended up playing pretty well, obviously, between at the end of the day, LaFleur did not develop Zach Wilson, and he didn't feel like he commanded the offense. And he is more of an introverted guy, right? And that's fine. You can be that type of guy and not be like a true leader of men and be a rah-rah type guy. But if the production and the winning then falls flat and you don't score a touchdown for 3 weeks, offense starts getting a little mad. This guy can't really control the locker room. I don't really know if it's a production standpoint right now. I think they're saying we want to go into a different direction. Even Connor Hughes was like the intent was to bring him back, but he got calls from other teams. That whole story kind of felt off. I didn't really
There's some
agree.
weird dialogue.
Yeah, it didn't feel right. So I think the Jets are doing the technical right thing if it's not just X's and O's. If they think they need a new leader and new voice in that offense, let's do it. And I think that's part of the reason why LaFleur you'll probably see go to a San Francisco, a Miami potentially, which would be interesting. And of course, Green Bay is probably a likely option as well.
There were so many, yeah, with his brother. There were so many strange, different storylines throughout LaFleur's tenure. Is he going to be a head coaching candidate? Then there was the whole thing. LaFleur's he's scheming guys wide open down the field, and the quarterbacks can't hit them. Now the last 3 weeks, the Jets can't get out of their own way. Obviously, a lot of injuries and
There's a
such.
lot of storylines though, Mike. There's like the year one, he was like Becton's going through some things right now. And they
Yeah,
asked McKay, McKay's like, I don't know what he's talking about. The Elijah Moore
about
stuff recently, Elijah Moore's dad, I think, on Twitter said that he doesn't hold people accountable, that they're babying certain people. It just never felt like, could you imagine the offensive line, the wide receivers in a room looking up in the projector with the laser pointer is LaFleur. And if he's not that type of like intense guy, you don't have to be, but if you don't have a top 15 offense, then the wheels start to turn, right? So that's
yeah.
a part of it. But you make a good point. You lose a ton of offensive linemen. You don't have your number one running back. It's like asking an accountant to be an accountant without a pen or a computer. Like I get it, it's difficult, but just don't be the worst accountant then.
Yeah, look, and the Jets threw for the most yards they've thrown for since, the second most yards since 2000. They eclipsed 4,000 for only the third time in that span. I mean, there's some weird stats, but then, you throw for 15 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. That's not modern football. Um, so there's just some weird things. Yeah, I tweeted out just now. I'm curious to your take. I think that the Jets' job is an attractive one for an offensive coordinator for the following reasons. You have three blue chip guys on offense. You have Garrett Wilson, AVT, Brees Hall. You have the 13th pick in the draft. You have assets. You have a general manager and a front office who are desperate to acquire a proven quarterback. And then you have some other young guys that are interesting, like Elijah Moore and Mekhi Becton. Dare I say Zach Wilson? I don't think so, but maybe someone does. Tyler Conklin, if he stays around, stuff like that. So there are definitely pieces there. You have a great young defense to back you up. I think it's an attractive job, but I don't know. That could be outweighed by what's probably going to be a very, very hot seat for the Jets coaching staff.
Yeah, I think that's the number one reason why I don't think it would be an enticing job for a veteran type of offense coordinator or a young guy. If you're a veteran, you want to go to a team that can be productive and win. And right now, this Jets team has shown when healthy they can do it. Or you could be a young guy and your first job is calling plays to a team that if they don't make the playoffs, they're probably going to get fired and clean house. So there is a bit of pressure there. Do you want to move your family and start a position where if you don't succeed in year one, you're gone? Now you can look at LaFleur as well. As you give this guy who has no play calling experience, who was, I think, the run game coordinator at the time, you give him the keys to a franchise number 2 overall pick as his first real challenge. And that is, you don't want to do that again. And that's why you have to go after a veteran. There's a lot of guys out there. I can read them off and get your takes, but the one that Samini tweeted, I think is fair. You look at the names of a Darrell Bevel, who Miami currently as the QB coach and passing game coordinator, but I think he was with Seattle in the past.
He was the Marshawn Lynch player.
Minnesota. He's been with Minnesota, and then he most recently was with Jacksonville when the Urban Meyer stuff went up in flames. Yes. I believe it was his last role before Miami.
That is correct.
At least Bevel isn't like, that's a guy who's been around, who has called plays, has a lot of miles on that tank, which is a good thing in the NFL when you're calling plays.
15 years as an OC, and not the OC, the show where everyone is supposed to be in high school, but they look like they're 35.
Also, before we get to the next candidate, I might have a concussion if we're being. I felt myself in some of my takes before, kind of going off the rails and not being as clear as I wanted to. I hit a deer going like 50 miles an hour before we started recording.
It's true.
Dead on the side of the road, probably. I feel out of it. Like, I got whiplash. I don't even know what happened.
Ugh. Yeah, you called me. Or like, I just smashed into a deer. I was like, did you see the Jets fired Mike Lafleur?
I know. I know. That was so Nathaniel Hackett, another option, has those ties with Saleh and Jacksonville. I get why it's an enticing pick, because he's shown he can build a good offense in Green Bay, but with how disastrous Denver situation, you just can't go that route with how bad that ended.
I love retread head coaching kind of guys that are offensive dudes. I remember I used to want the Jets to get North Turner all the time, just an example of someone similar. But yeah, I mean, watching what the Broncos did this year was disgusting. It's hard to hire a guy who, if the Broncos would have scored 18 points in every game this year, they would have went 13-4, and they ended up 5-12. So, I mean, it was just dysfunction. He looks like an imbecile. It's tough, but he did have some terrific years. Aaron Rodgers was the MVP in back-to-back years with Hackett, so that's the one thing. Maybe you bring in Hackett and try to entice somehow to get Aaron Rodgers over here. That would be a positive. What about I heard Todd Monken is an interesting name, who was with the Bucks and the Browns, and now with Georgia. Another kind of interesting guy who's been around the block.
I feel like a lot of guys I'd be satisfied with. The guy I'd be over the moon with is Frank Reich, but Frank Reich
that's the guy.
Looking, I think he's interviewing. I want to say with Houston and
maybe the Broncos.
Yeah, so I know Frank Reich will get some play, but again, that's the type of guy where he takes a 1-year pass with the 3 blue chip guys. If then he knows I can find an offensive coordinator job whenever I want, right?
Yeah, he could be could be a head coach somewhere. I was shocked that the Colts fired him. He had done a terrific job, and he's the kind of guy who's worked in the last few years with all these veteran quarterbacks, which is probably what the Jets are going to be using in 2023, which is good. I really like Frank Reich. And yeah, again, like you said, that's the kind of guy that fits perfectly, because if he does come here for 1 year, he'll probably have a chance to do something more lucrative after, maybe become a head coach again. And then, if it doesn't work out, he's in a similar situation than that he is right now. Man, I
Fair.
would take Reich. That would be great.
Gary Kubiak, another
Jet
name that's
quarterback.
been thrown around.
Yes, that's the kind of North Turner dude. Gary Kubiak won a Super Bowl, and he had all those crazy years with Matt Schaub. Matt Schaub,
Yeah.
super underrated. Throwing for like 4,700 yards, 29 touchdowns. Texans had some real good teams. That would be very interesting.
Another good one. Samini doesn't think he would be a candidate though, but maybe that's a good sign. Sometimes like the Jets beat is like unplugged. Like they literally will say the opposite that's about to happen. Greg Olson was a name that Samini threw out there. I don't. You can't have a first time play caller.
No,
I
and
just don't think you can.
honestly, Greg Olson is like he's an okay color guy. I love Kevin Burkhardt. I know they do the broadcast together. I think Olson's a little bit corny, and I don't know how that would possibly translate to offensive coordinating, but I agree with you. Just veteran OC, veteran quarterback next year. There's no time to fool around. If he comes in, if one of these guys comes in and really blows the Jets away, whatever, it's hard to argue, but I'm going with a guy who's been around the block.
So a guy who's been around the block, Matt Nagy,
Interesting. Interesting as
he,
well.
Pro
You
Bowl
know,
year with Mitch Trubisky. I know the thing is like people will view Matt Nagy's like collapse towards the end as like he's like a Gase type guy. Like Nagy comes from the coaching tree. He I wouldn't hate it. It's not my top option, but at the end of the day, I feel like people would be fake outraged over that hire.
I like Matt Nagy. People forget. Obviously, you have the double doink in 2018. The Bears are 12-4. And who knows what would have happened. Then they made the playoffs again in 2020 when they went 8-8. And down the stretch of that year, I remember the Bears were averaging north of 30 points a game down the stretch. Didn't work out in 2021, but you're right. Even with Trubisky had some solid years, made a Pro Bowl, 24 touchdowns. Um, there are worse guys, and that's the kind of guy who maybe he just is not, cut out to be the head coach, but could be a good coordinator, like you said, comes from the Chiefs and been around that situation. So, it is scary with these disturbed men who really do weird shit as head coaches. Like Nathaniel Hackett and Matt Nagy just did weird shit when they were the head coach. So
And you could do that as a coordinator too if you're
yes,
winning
be
games.
weird,
Like that's
dude.
fine.
Be an idiot. Like don't show your face. I don't go up in the booth. Fine, there are many options. But that's another one. Booth Lafleur was another good storyline.
LaBooth was great. The last one I'll think of, and if you're gonna make me take a guy who's never called a game before, you're gonna love it, Josh McCown.
Oh, dude, done. Say less. Uncle Josh can call all the plays. Terrific jet. I want him in the ear of my young quarterback. Honestly, what's not talked about so much is when Josh McCown left the Jets is when Sam Darnold really fell off a cliff in 2020. So, and then remember Josh McCown went to the Eagles and played that playoff game because Carson Wentz is allergic to the playoffs. But
I think what was
Uncle
annoying
Josh,
is didn't McCown got the boot in 2019? No,
he was there in 2019. 2019?
no, because remember
No, you're
Simeon
right. He was
came
there in
in,
17 and 18.
but we
Yeah.
were like, make him the QB coach. He wants to coach, and then Adam Gase was like, probably not. Fuck him.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. He was not there in 2019 because he was the starter in 2017 and then played a few games in 18. Regardless, give me Uncle Josh over anybody.
I
Fuck
think
whoever
our
it
our
is.
1A is Frank Reich. We like
Yes.
the idea of a Kubiak. You can talk me into uh, a lot of guys. I just don't want a first time play caller. But if you're gonna give me one, Uncle Josh.
Yeah, and look, Monken is interesting. We kind of mentioned him before. I was looking at some of his teams. He had those years where Fitz and Jameis Winston were the quarterbacks for the Bucks, and they would throw for 1 billion yards. Fitz was leading the league in yards per game, doing it with some weird guys. Then he went to Cleveland with stupid Freddie Kitchens, and Odell and Jarvis Landry both went over 1,000 yards, and Nick Chubb went for 1,500 on the ground. So like normal stuff. That Browns team was disappointing. They made the playoffs the year before and then went 6-10, but or they were better the year before. But there's definitely some interesting options. I don't know if anyone's head and shoulders above, whatever Lafleur was going to do in 2023. But Frank Reich is that guy. He is the guy who's head and shoulders above. That would be a great hire. Or he could be Brandon Tierney is just tweeting that the Jets should call Sean Payton. I don't even know what that means.
He's a fucking idiot. He literally, I can't even. I
It's
don't
the
want to.
worst takes. What are they talking about?
Every head coach, every opening right now that has a head coach, they want Sean Payton, and he's like, no, he's gonna become the offensive coordinator for the Jets. All right, thanks, Brandon Tierney.
Good take. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Jets
and
should get Vince Lombardi to be the offensive coordinator.
yeah, and also, I mean, Cliff Kingsbury's name that's been thrown around.
That would be fun. I mean, I would take that in a second. I don't know if he wants to be an offensive coordinator or what. Or I heard something about the Patriots.
We should get Cliff Kingsbury to be the offensive coordinator and trade for Kyler Murray. I'm sure that would work out well.
It's kind of
Imagine
right.
how
Play
pissed
video
Kyler
games.
would be.
Him and Sauce can make a Twitch stream together. The man, I mean, there's options. What it's crazy the Patriots don't get more hate for making Matt Patricia their offensive coordinator. It's like, what if the Jets made Greg Williams their offensive coordinator?
And then they take Adam Gase and make them like the secondary coach because Joe Judge is on that side of the ball too.
Yeah, and then take one of Robert Saleh's 11 children and make them the defensive coordinator. It's insane.
Yeah. I do want to get back to one thing though. This is one of the situations that I wish Lafleur the best in his next job. Like I will be rooting for that guy. It's not like he embarrassed the franchise. Like Adam Gase leaves, I hope Lincoln High School scores 0 points a game. LaFleur leaves, perfectly fine with him doing well elsewhere, unless it's Miami. So, best of luck to LaBooth. Mike, any parting words?
Gonna miss, Booth LaFleur. I mean, it's just odd. There were so many crazy trick plays last year in 2021 and really creative. This year, a step back. The Jets tried to get back to something. You just feel for the guy because, again, I've said it in the past on our podcast. Would the Jets defense do what it did if Sauce Gardner and Quinnen went down? The answer is no. You lose Brees and AVT. Is that an excuse to, again, be the 29th offense and score 0 touchdowns in the last 3 games? No. But there were some extenuating circumstances. I would have kept the guy. Hopefully they bring in a real good, smart veteran coach.
All right. We'll wrap it there. If you made this far, hit that subscribe button. We'll keep bringing the content out. And Mike, I'll talk to you soon.
Go ice your head or your face.
Yeah. Don't feel great.
Don't feel
great. I got better throughout. In the beginning, I was like, I couldn't formulate a take. I feel a little bit better.
We're back.
All right. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, buddy.